Sometimes you don't realize he didn't just shut down, it started long before. This is marriage wisdom for wives who want a long marriage, and I am Donna. And this is something women don't notice at first, because what stands out is the silence. What stands out is when he stops talking, when the conversations get shorter, when the answer turns into I'm good or nothing's wrong, when he used to engage and now he doesn't. That's what gets your attention. That's what feels different. That's what makes you stop and think what changed. But what most people miss is what happened before that, because the silence didn't just show up, it built. And if you only focus on the silence, you'll miss the pattern that created it. Because men don't usually shut down all at once. It doesn't happen in one conversation. It doesn't happen from one disagreement. It happens in moments, small moments, moments that don't seem big at the time, moments where something didn't feel right, but it wasn't addressed, moments where he may have said something and it didn't land the way he expected, moments where he tried to express something and it felt like it got corrected instead of heard. And I want to slow that down right there, because this is where understanding begins. Because sometimes what feels like a normal response to you feels like correction to him. You might be explaining, you might be clarifying, you might be trying to help, you might even be right. But how it lands is what matters. Because if it lands like correction, over time, it creates a feeling. And that feeling says there are moments where he may feel unheard. Not because you didn't listen, but because he didn't feel received. There's a difference. You can hear someone's words and still not receive what they're trying to say. And when that happens more than once, it starts to register. Not loudly, not in a way he always explains, but internally. Then there's tone. And tone matters more than people realize, because you can say the same exact words in two different tones and they will land completely different. Tone can turn a conversation into something that feels like pressure. Tone can make someone feel like they're being corrected, even if that wasn't the intention. Tone can shift the entire experience without changing the words. And over time, those small shifts in tone start to matter. Then there's pressure, not always intentional, not always obvious, but it builds. The feeling of needing to explain himself, the feeling of needing to get it right, the feeling of needing to respond a certain way. And when conversations start to feel like pressure, people adjust. And men often adjust quietly. They don't always stop the conversation and say, "That doesn't feel good to me. That's too much for me. That's not landing right." A lot of times, they just take it in. They process it. And then they change how they show up. They may talk a little less. They may share a little less. They may choose silence instead of explaining themselves again. Not because they don't care, but because something about the experience didn't feel the same. And when those moments repeat, they don't stay small, they add up. One moment becomes two. Two moments become several, and several become a pattern. And once it becomes a pattern, that's when things start to shift. Because now it's not just about one conversation, it's about how conversations feel over time. It's about what he expects the experience to be. And if the experience has been correction, pressure, not feeling fully heard, or feeling like he has to explain himself too much, then silence starts to feel easier. Silence starts to feel like less work. Silence starts to feel like peace. And that's where the disconnect begins. Because now you're noticing the silence, but he's responding to the pattern. And those are two different things. That's why it can feel confusing, because you're looking at what's happening now, and he's reacting to what's been happening over time. And that's why this matters, because if you only address the silence, you'll miss the opportunity to shift the pattern, because the silence is not the beginning, it's the result. And once you understand that, you start paying attention differently. You start noticing how things are landing, not just what's being said. You start becoming aware of tone, of timing, of how something is received, not just how it was meant. Because intentions matter, but impact matters too. And when both are understood, communication changes. Because now it's not about saying more, it's about creating a space where what is said can actually be received, where he doesn't feel pressure, where he doesn't feel like he has to defend himself. And when that space exists, something shifts, because now he feels safer to speak again, safer to share again, safer to engage again, because communication isn't just about talking. It's about how safe it feels to talk. And men don't shut down in the moment. They shut down after a pattern, after enough moments that didn't feel right, after enough conversations that didn't land the way they needed it to, after enough experiences that made silence feel easier. And that right there is something you want to recognize early, not when the silence is already there, but when the moments are still small. Because when you catch it early, you can shift it early. You can adjust tone. You can create space. You can listen in a way that feels receiving, not correcting, because long marriages are not built on reacting to problems after they grow. They're built on recognizing patterns while they're still small and adjusting before they turn into distance. And that is how long marriages are built.